guys, what's up? It's me, the Nun. Welcome to my channel. Since we're talking about The Conjuring today, I thought I'd dress up, put on my best habit. I'm actually sorry, I know this is really disgusting and creepy. And this mask is insane. Like, the scariest part of the mask is how big this forehead is. Like, look at that. The nun, more like the forehead, am I right? I've actually had a really amazing day as the nun. Like, I did a little photo shoot, I did some cooking, I even got a victory royale. Like, when the power of God is on your side, you can do anything, seriously. I know this mask is probably too scary for me to wear for the entire video, so I'll take it off. That's much better. I feel like more myself. So let's get into it. The Conjuring franchise is currently the highest grossing horror franchise of all time, with 9 films in the series and more on the way. These films follow the true stories of Ed and Lorraine Warren, a married couple who were also paranormal investigators. Ed Warren was a self-taught demonologist, while Lorraine was a clairvoyant and medium. While the films depict Ed and Lorraine Warren as these cool, supernatural demon cops, the real story of the cases they were involved with, as well as their relationship, is a lot nuanced and darker than the films portray. In real life, Ed started off as a painter, which him and Lorraine used to get their start in demon hunting. Basically, they'd travel around to allegedly haunted houses in New England, and Ed would stand outside and do a painting of the house, and then they'd knock on the door and be like, "We just did this amazing painting of your house, can we come in?" And then presumably Lorraine would be like, "Wait a minute, is it haunted in here?" And they'd be like, yeah, it is. And then they would do like an exorcist or something. They would do what they do. Just a bunch of crap, basically. They built up some notoriety by doing this for a few years, and in 1952, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, presumably to try and give themselves some credibility. From then on, if there was any famous case of paranormal activity, the Warrens were involved. They didn't charge for their services, but they were able to build up their fame and fortune through books and speaking engagements and a lot of TV. Now that the final Conjuring film has been released, I thought it'd be fun to take a deep dive into the 9 films and how they vary in quality quite dramatically, as well as to see how they stack up against the real-life cases that inspired them. The whole Conjuring universe began when a producer became interested in the Warren story when they played them a tape from the Perron family, which is depicted in the first Conjuring film. It took 14 years to get the first film off the ground, and once it did, Ed had died, but Lorraine was still alive. She was engaged as a consultant for the films and was allegedly paid $150,000 per film. In the film, Lorraine is played by Vera Farmiga, and Ed is played by Patrick Wilson, and can we just note how crazy that casting is when you compare them to the real life Warrens? Like, I can kind of see the resemblance between Lorraine and Vera Farmiga, but the fact that they got Patrick Wilson to play Ed Warren, oh, they did him a favor. They did Ed a big favor, let me just say that. And if you think I'm being like unnecessarily mean to Ed, just stick around until I tell you what Ed was really like as a person, and maybe you'll agree with me. But surely we can all agree on the fact that Patrick Wilson is really hot. Anyway, let's get into the cinematic universe of it all. The first Conjuring movie opens with Ed and Lorraine investigating the case of Annabelle, a haunted doll with amazing eyelashes. Now, we're going to come back to Annabelle when we talk about her own spin-off film, but basically Ed and Lorraine take her away and they imprison her in their little museum of weird haunted things that they have in their house. Ed even introduces their little museum with the same speech that I give people who come over to my apartment.
Everything you see in here is either haunted, cursed, or has been used in some kind of ritualistic practice.
We're then introduced to the Perron family, who move into a big farmhouse in Rhode Island in 1971 and immediately start noticing weird occurrences around the house. They have this big, weird, creepy basement. All the clocks stop at 3:07 a.m. every night. The mom keeps getting weird bruises, and Joey King and her sister are having a fart off with one of the spirits in her room.
Stop farting. It really stinks.
Don't blame that on me, it's you.
The creepiest part of all of this is when the mom and the youngest daughter are playing their little hide and seek clap game, and at one point one of the spirits' hands come out of the closet and claps. Ugh, yuck. They eventually have the night from hell when one of the spirits attacks Joey King. They smash all the pictures off the wall. A witch attacks some people in the bedroom, and the mum falls down the stairs in the basement, which I actually think might have just been a result of her own clumsiness. Like, I think she just ran into the door and blamed a demon for it, which isn't fair. The family then seeks the help of Ed and Lorraine. They do some research and they find out that the house is being haunted by Bathsheba Sherman, a Satanist who previously lived at the house and sacrificed her baby to the devil before herself at 3:07 a.m. The Warrens come in and set up all this equipment to gather evidence, and things just start getting crazier. They find all these weird hidden passageways in the house, and Lorraine ends up falling through the house between the walls. And while I'd hate to experience that myself, it's pretty funny to watch. Lorraine finds out that Caroline, the mum, is actually possessed by Bathsheba, and the bruises are a result of Bathsheba feeding off her. And there's also this little subplot where Bathsheba's also haunting the Warrens' house back home and queening out with Annabelle for some reason. But anyway, Caroline eventually goes full Bathsheba mode and tries to kill her kids. And she also gains magical powers like being able to control crows, I guess. The Warrens intervene by tying Caroline to a chair and trying to do an exorcism on her, but Bathsheba gags everyone by floating up in the air. The exorcism eventually works and Caroline throws up, which, yeah, fair enough. She's been through a lot. Then everyone lives happily ever after, and Ed puts this haunted music box in their museum of weird haunted crap. Yay! Overall, I think this first movie is pretty great. It's an unashamedly silly movie, but it's very polished and well made, with some genuinely really creepy imagery. All of the practical effects and the period setting are also a fun throwback to horror classics like The Exorcist and Poltergeist. Director James Wan also uses a lot of long takes with wide-angle lenses in this, which gives it a kind of documentary film and creates tension with these expansive frames where the scares could seemingly come from any direction. I also really enjoy Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga's performance in this. They're both kind of hammered up a bit, but their conviction is why we're along for the ride instead of laughing at it. The film versions of Ed and Lorraine are also really interesting characters, with the script delving into their contradictions, being a married religious demon hunting couple. The film also does a great job of fleshing out the family that's being haunted before Ed and Lorraine even arrive, so you actually kind of care about them by the time shit is getting crazy. In terms of the true story that inspired the film, it's pretty different, even though the studio was pushing the based on a true story angle so hard that even the cast seemed to be making up their own ghost stories. Vera Farmiga did an interview where she said she was slashed by presumably a demon after filming finished, but to me the scariest part of this video is her chewing sounds.
I opened my computer and there was these claw marks across the last day after we got back, flew home from North Carolina where we filmed, and the next morning I woke up in my own bed and the same claw marks appeared on my thigh.
And Joey King also seemed to claim that working on this film gave her some sort of blood disease.
Is it true that when you were on The Conjuring that you got like physical stuff happened to you?
I developed this bizarre, rare, out of nowhere blood disorder, and basically my body, like all the red platelets from my body were like drained. They were just like gone. And then all of a sudden I got home and I've never had a problem with my blood since. Right.
In real life, the Perrin family did claim to be haunted by spirits for the 9 years that they lived there, but some were nice and some were angry, just like real neighbors. One of the daughters, Andrea Perrin, even said there was a spirit that spoke to her mum in an angry Scottish brogue. It said to her, "'Twas a mistress once before you came, and mistress will be here anon." I don't really know what that means. In terms of the Bathsheba of it all, she was a real woman that lived in the area in 1812, but not at the Perrin house. There was an incident where a baby died in Bathsheba's care, but there was never a proper investigation, so it's unclear whether the baby died from an accident or she killed the baby. And also, Bathsheba did not kill herself. She died by assumedly natural causes. But over time, it seems like the story's been exaggerated and turned into folklore where she's this baby-killing Satanist witch. The real Andrea Perrin is actually really defensive of Bathsheba and said that Lorraine just seemed to blame everything on her, even though it wasn't all her fault. There's also the matter of the exorcism in the film. The Warrens insist that they would never hold an exorcism themselves because that's obviously ridiculous. But they did do a seance where the mother Andrea Perrin was levitated up off the floor by a spirit and thrown across the room. In real life, the parents kicked the Warrens out after the freaky seance because they thought that they didn't know what they were doing, and they continued living in that house for years. So to evaluate all these films, I'm going to propose a credibility rating. The scale will go from total shit to slightly credible to credible to factual documentary. And for the first Conjuring movie, I'm gonna say it's slightly credible. Don't be mad. It seems that in this one, the filmmakers did at least try to depict the real events that the Perron family and the Warrens said happened in the house. So after The Conjuring, the next film in the franchise is Annabelle, our favorite fabulous doll. The film Annabelle is set before The Conjuring, before the Warrens stopped her reign of terror by putting her in a glass box. The film follows the couple Mia and John, a couple in the 1960s who are expecting a baby. Mia loves dolls, and one day John comes home and presents her with an Annabelle doll as a gift for their future child. They also make this really gross joke when John's about to give the doll to her.
There's something I want to give you.
Oh no, the last time you said that, I ended up pregnant.
One night, Mia and John's neighbors are killed by a Manson family-like cult that their daughter has joined, and they also attack Mia and John and stab Mia in the stomach. Then one of the cult members kills herself in the nursery while holding the Annabelle doll, which of course means the Annabelle doll gets possessed. The doctors tell Mia that her baby's fine, but she's confined to bed rest, and from then on she starts experiencing weird stuff around the house, like a haunted sewing machine, or a part where Annabelle makes her popcorn set on fire. Scary stuff. John throws Annabelle in the bin and tries to cheer up Mia with her favorite snack. And once their baby Leah is born, they move into a new apartment where unfortunately Annabelle follows them. Mia's haunting continues and she meets their neighbor Evelyn, who helps Mia out with the supernatural side of things. Mia learns that the people who attacked her are part of a cult called the Disciples of the Ram, and that they've summoned a demon who needs to claim a soul from their household. They seek help from their local priest, who goes to contact the Warrens for help, but he gets attacked by the demons before he's able to do that. Crazy shit continues at the house until the neighbor Evelyn gives up her soul to the demon and throws herself out the window while holding Annabelle. Then the movie ends with Annabelle in a store and a woman coming in and looking at her and being like, "That would be a lovely gift for my daughter. This horrible, creepy doll. She would love this."
You want me to bring it up?
Yes, please.
Like, that's like the worst birthday gift ever. I am kind of speeding through this movie because it was pretty boring. It's kind of a rehash of the type of scares that The Conjuring has, but in a more repetitive and unoriginal way. It seems like they were trying to do a bit of a Rosemary's Baby thing with this movie, with Mia being pregnant and a ram-like devil haunting her, and iconic imagery such as the 1960s baby stroller. I kept waiting for Evelyn, the neighbor, to be like a part of the cults and that to be a twist in the movie, but it never happened, so it just kind of unfolded without any surprises. There are some mild scares in this, like I do always get scared when the ghost slash demon slash spirit like runs at people. That's always really scary to me, but like that's about it. And to be honest, I don't really find the Annabelle doll in the movie that scary. Like she just is kind of this flop doll who just looks ridiculous sitting around on the couch by herself. In real life, Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll, decidedly less creepy than the film version and with way worse eyebrows. They really yassified Annabelle for the film version, like it's giving lip filler, facelift, lash lift, cheek filler, and Botox at minimum. The Warrens encountered Annabelle when a nurse said she received the doll as a present from her mother and the doll started moving on its own. They then held a seance with a medium who said the spirit of a 6-year-old girl named Annabelle went into the doll. Annabelle was apparently killed in a car accident in front of the home, but the Warrens said the spirit was not Annabelle. It was a demon pretending to be Annabelle. Ed then claims that the doll psychically slashed one of the nurse's friends and tried to strangle him. The Warrens then took the doll back to their museum of creepy shit, where Ed said even more stuff happened. He says people who've made fun of Annabelle have all faced dire consequences, like a priest who crashed his car after throwing Annabelle across the room, and a college student who died after making fun of Annabelle.
College students came one day. One of them said this is nothing but a bunch of bunk. I don't believe in it. He went over to the Raggedy Ann doll, which is in a case, knocking on it. He said, this doll can't do anything. I dare it right now to put slashes on me. I put him out of the building. Less than 3 hours later, that boy was dead.
In terms of the credibility of all of this, there is simply no proof whatsoever. All of this evidence just comes from Ed's stories. No one has actually put their name to any of this. So I'm going to classify all the Annabelle stuff in this as total shit. I will note that the Conjuring spin-off movies don't claim to be based on a true story, but they seem to do incorporate some of the true story, like the fact that she ended up at a nurse's house and that she allegedly stood up on her own. So after Annabelle, we went back to the main series and The Conjuring 2 was released. This film film opens with the Warrens investigating the Amityville Horror, which is the real-life case that made the Warrens famous. This case involves the Lutz family, who moved into a house where previously 23-year-old Ron DeFeo had murdered his entire family. The Lutz family claimed that the house was haunted, and they enlisted the help of the Warrens. Their story was eventually turned into a book and then a series of films. In the film version, Lorraine embodies Ron DeFeo and carries out the murders as him, and even encounters a scary nun who seems to be fixated on killing Ed. We then go across the pond to Enfield, London, where we meet the Hodgson family. We see the girls iconically having a smoke at school, and they're even bullied by some homophobic kids.
Shut up, Peter. Lesbo.
Back at home, Janet has been sleepwalking, and she's being targeted by an angry elderly man ghost named Bill, who used to live at the house. The mum Peggy calls the police, who witness a chair moving across the room on its own. And they eventually get more attention, with Janet even doing an interview as Bill on the TV. We also get to see the Warrens doing a TV interview with a skeptic in this movie, which the real life Warrens seem to do quite a lot. I even found this crazy episode of them on this TV show with people who claim to have been attacked by a ghost, and they introduced them with some of the most ridiculous descriptions I've ever seen.
It's coming again, it's happening again. The bed, there would be
Ed in particular seemed really interested in fighting everyone on the show, and the skeptics really went in on the people who said they were attacked.
So you got behind in your rant, and that's when it started. No, you know what happened? No, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah.
I love how mean that woman was, but I also think she's kind of iconic. Meanwhile, Lorraine continues to be haunted by the nun, and Ed seemingly has a dream about the nun and nonchalantly paints the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life, and then acts like it's normal.
Couldn't get out of my head, so well, maybe this might help. Yeah, I know I'm no Picasso, but didn't think it was that bad.
This is probably the most insane scene of the whole franchise. She's like, "Oh, what are you painting, sweetie?" And he's like, "Oh, just a terrifying nun. Why are you freaked out?" Anyway, the nun eventually attacks Lorraine, and she scribbles some stuff in her Bible, which will come back later. The Warrens eventually show up in Enfield to help the Hodgson family, but Lorraine doesn't want to because she's afraid that the nun will kill Ed. Ed communicates with Janet speaking as Bill, and this is one of my favorite scenes in the franchise because they keep Janet out of focus in the background and shoot it all in one long take. Over the course of the chat, the blurry outline of Janet morphs into Bill Wilkins, the old man, and then morphs back by the end. It's pretty cool. Just like in the first film, things eventually get crazier in the house as time goes on. Like when Janet wakes up in the middle of the night on the roof. Ugh, that moment when you wake up on the roof. We've all been there. There's also some great moments like when Ed has to go down into the flooded cellar and retrieve Bill Wilkins's dentures out of this flooded water. And when Bill's haunting causes all the crosses in the girls' room to turn upside down. The nun is also there terrorizing Lorraine, of course. I guess she made the trip across the pond too. And of course there's the crooked man who is also after the family. Things are getting pretty intense in there. The other investigators of the haunting eventually get footage of Janet staging a scene, and the Warrens leave not wanting to be associated with a hoax. But then Lorraine has a revelation that the ghost of Bill Wilkins is actually being manipulated by this scary nun, who is the real villain of the whole thing. Lorraine says that she can control the scary nun by saying its name, which she scratched into her Bible earlier in the film. So they go back to the house and Janet is trapped inside. Ed tries to get into the house but is foiled in multiple Looney Tunes type ways, like when he gets smacked in the face by a couch, and being burned by a conveniently placed steam pipe. Ed eventually gets to Janet, who's about to jump out the window. He grabs her, but then they both fall out the window. Then Lorraine comes into the house and faces off with the demon nun. She gags the demon nun by saying her name, Valak, which sends her back to hell.
You are Valak! The defiler! The profane! I condemn you back to hell!
And they all live happily ever after, and Ed and Lorraine dance in their kitchen. Yay! Overall, I think this is a really good sequel, and it's kind of just as fun as the first film. It is kind of the same plot with the haunted house, but they managed to make the scares even creepier with the scary old man. The first Conjuring film relies on more cliche horror imagery, like a witch and a scary little boy. Conjuring 2 gives the franchise its own unique visual identity with the inclusion of characters like the Crooked Man and the Nun. It does feel a little overstuffed at times, but it mostly has this really fun roller roller coaster theme park type ride feel, which really works for this film. There's also some fun Easter eggs in this film that actually reveal the name of the demon before Lorraine remembers it herself. Now let's look at how this stacks up against the real life case. The real Enfield haunting does center around the Hodgson family, who did say they were dealing with a ghost/demon, but with a few differences. The mother did in fact call the police after she witnessed furniture moving around and strange sounds in her house, and the police say they did actually see a chair moving on its own when they went to investigate.
It came off the floor, or maybe a ½ inch I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest.
The strange phenomena in the house did become famous after it was reported upon by the Daily Mirror, and for the next 1.5 years, many people came by the house to investigate, with some saying they witnessed disembodied voices, objects moving on their own, and of course, the children levitating. Apparently in real life, the Warrens did show up to the house, and Ed told one of the investigators that he could stand to make a lot of money from the case, and then they got kicked out. And that was the last they had to do with it. No scary nun, no Warren saving the day. They were just kicked out and they went home. When skeptics started investigating, it became clear that the cause of all this was probably just Janet, the 11-year-old girl. Apparently she had a talent for ventriloquism, which would explain the disembodied voices.
No.
Who's there?
Doctor.
And she was even caught practicing her levitation by jumping off her bed. And when you look at the pictures of the levitation, it is so clearly just Janet jumping off of her bed that I couldn't help but laugh seeing the real Lorraine describe it like it's the scariest thing she's ever seen.
Oh my God. The levitation of those girls. They would levitate.
I remember being pulled from my bed. I felt like a cold hand feeling.
Like, it is so easy to fake that. Like, look, I actually did this in my room earlier. Look, that's me levitating. But wait, look at that picture again. What's that in the background? The Nun. To me, this Enfield haunting really just seems like a case of mass hysteria, fueled by a combination of a little girl who was looking for attention and investigators who wanted to believe that something was going on. So I'm sorry, but for this one, I'm gonna say it's total shit. Ed and Lorraine's love story is a bit more foregrounded in this film, with Lorraine being terrified of Ed's death and the film ending on them dancing, and Ed even sings Elvis to Lorraine and the family at one point, which I'll be honest, did make me tear up. I was watching this movie very tired and I thought it was a beautiful scene. But anyway, this is probably a good time to bring up that the real life Warren's home life was actually pretty messed up and not like what the film suggests. In 2014, a woman named Judith Penny made a legal declaration alleging that a 30-year-old Ed Warren initiated a sexual relationship with her when she was 15 years old, and that she also lived with the Warrens for 40 years. Penny alleged that Ed would take turns sleeping upstairs with Lorraine and sleeping downstairs with her. She also alleged that the Warrens forced her to have an abortion after she became pregnant, and that Ed was abusive towards Lorraine. When Lorraine signed on as a consultant for the films, she had a clause in her contract that said they weren't allowed to show her engaging in activities such as sex with a minor, child pornography, prostitution, or sexual assault. Which is so insane. The idea of Lorraine being in negotiations being like, and you better not include any scenes of me having sex with a minor. You'd be like, well, I wasn't going to, but now you say that, I kind of think that you did that. Lorraine denied all of the accusations, and so did the family, but at minimum, it seems like the depiction of the Warrens on screen is a sanitized version, and I'll be real, it seems like the real Warrens were terrible people. So anyway, the next film that we get in this franchise is Annabelle Creations. This film is a prequel to all of the films, and surprise, deals with how Annabelle was created. This film opens with iconic Australian actor Anthony LaPaglia making Annabelle, and they even give Annabelle a bit of a glow down for this movie. Like, this is obviously before she got her filler and lash lift. After Anthony LaPaglia makes the doll, we have this little prologue where Anthony's daughter Annabelle is killed by a car, which is a crazy scene.
I'll get it.
Like, when I was watching this, I was like, I actually gasped. We then jump forward in time and meet a bunch of orphans who are on their way to live at Anthony LaPaglia's house, including an orphan Janice who has a disability from polio. It turns out Anthony LaPaglia has become antisocial and mean after the death of his daughter, and his wife Miranda Otto is kept away in a private room and no one can see her. Janice sneaks into Annabelle's old room and finds Annabelle the doll hanging out in a closet, which is giving lesbian. And she has this creepy moment in the room where something is walking towards her under a sheet. As is common in these films, the supernatural stuff in the house just keeps getting worse and more frequent. Like, Janice meets what looks like the real life Annabelle, who tells her that she wants her soul.
Your soul.
She has the night from hell and gets her shit rocked in that house. And eventually the spirit version of Annabelle vomits in her mouth and possesses her. Doll Annabelle then kills ALP in a really gruesome way. And the orphan's care sister Charlotte gets the tea on Annabelle from Miranda Otto, who is giving Phantom of the Opera down in this movie. She looks ridiculous as fuck chilling in her room like this, but I love it. I would do the same. I guess I am kind of doing the same right now. But anyway, Phantom of the Opera Miranda Otto tells Sister Charlotte that they gave permission for their daughter's spirit to move into the doll, but it turned out that the spirit was actually a demon, which is what Ed and Lorraine Warren said happened with the real life Annabelle. They trap Janice in the Annabelle closet so they can get away, and then later when they go and check on her, they find a hole in the wall and Janice missing. They then take Annabelle the doll away in a police car, presumably going to doll jail. Then Janice ends up in an orphanage still possessed by the spirit of Annabelle, and she's then adopted by the Higgins family from the first Annabelle film. And they even give her a Raggedy Ann doll in reference to the real Annabelle. And then everything loops back around and we see the possessed Annabelle / Janice killing the Higgins family, which happens at the beginning of the first Annabelle film. Overall, I'll say I actually had a pretty good time with this movie. It's the same sort of haunted house formula that all the films seem to use so far, but it's done pretty well and it's definitely way more interesting than the first Annabelle film. There's also some pretty funny doll moments in this, like when they accidentally shoot Annabelle with a gun and she looks at them like, fuck you, bitch. As well as the time Janice looks through a keyhole and just sees Annabelle chilling in the rocking chair. There's also a part where ALP is talking to Sister Charlotte about the convent that she comes from, and she's showing him a photo of her and the girls, and he's like, who's that in the background? And points to the terrifying nun. And Sister Charlotte is just like, oh, I don't know, I guess I wasn't friends with her.
Who's this?
I don't know. I don't think I even met her.
Like, yeah, I'd hope not. I feel like if someone pointed out a terrifying demon nun in the background of my picture, I would have a bit more of a reaction. In terms of the credibility for this, as I said, the spin-off movies don't really claim to be based on a true story, so I'm still gonna have to give this one total shit. Most movies, in fact, are made up. They're total shit. But unfortunately, I've made this system and I have to give this movie that. So next up in the timeline, we have The Nun. Finally, we get to talk more about The Nun. So this movie is about exactly what it sounds like. It's about the nun. And right from the opening few minutes of this movie, it's kind of a mess. This movie opens with a little highlight reel of the nun's best moments from The Conjuring 2, which is a really odd choice. And then it says, the following occurred in 1952, even though this is not based on a true story. So this movie follows Thaisa Farmiga as a nun in training who's sent to Romania to investigate the deaths of some nuns at a convent. These nuns, of course, were killed by the titular nun, Valak. Now let me just stop here and say, Thaisa Farmiga in this movie is playing a character named Sister Irene. In real life, Thaisa Farmiga is Vera Farmiga's sister, which that alone gagged me because I thought they were mother and daughter, but they're sisters. But anyway, in the Conjuring universe, Sister Irene, played by Thaisa Farmiga, and Lorraine Warren, played by Vera Farmiga, are not related. They're just two people in the same cinematic universe who happen to look exactly like each other. Like, that is so distracting. But to be honest, I love both Farmigas, so I'm gonna let it slide. So anyway, Thaisa Farmiga travels to Romania with Father Burke, and she meets up with the man Maurice, who's the guy who found the first dead nun from the convent. They go and meet the nuns at the convent and they find out that it's actually built on a literal gateway to hell that was sealed with the blood of Jesus Christ. Bombing from the war then broke the seal to the gateway to hell, and the nuns have kept up a constant prayer ever since to keep the evil at bay. Just like in all these films, creepy stuff starts happening at the convent, the nun is menacing some people, and the evil from hell in the basement threatens to be unleashed. There is one really great part in this where Thaisa Farmiga goes into the church area to do some prayers to keep the evil at bay, and then a bunch of the other nuns just assemble for like an emergency prayer session.
We need to pray now. And whatever happens, whatever you may see or hear, keep your eyes forward and don't stop praying.
Then it turns out all the other nuns were actually just in Thaisa Farmiga's head, and it was a trick by Valak to get her to stop praying. Oh, she got her good. In the end, they go down to the gateway to hell in the basement to retrieve the blood of Christ.
The blood of Christ. Holy shit. The holiest.
And Thaisa ends up being possessed by the nun for a bit. And Thaisa is forced to give up the blood of Christ to Valak, the nun. But she actually tricks her. It turns out Thaisa actually has the blood of Christ in her mouth, and she spits it all over the Valak, and it kills her, which is extremely unsanitary. Extremely unsanitary. But it did work. but I think it would taste terrible and you would never catch me doing that. Anyway, they all live happily ever after, but it turns out Maurice is actually possessed by the nun and she got away. Damn it. Then we get this ending where Ed and Lorraine are doing their lecture from the first film, and it turns out the guy that they're doing the exorcism on is actually Maurice. It's kind of a pointless Easter egg, to be honest. Anyway, overall, I thought this movie was pretty boring, unfortunately. I do like the idea of the Vatican investigating a demon nun, but because this ends up just being like a haunted house movie but in a convent, it ends up feeling quite repetitive. It doesn't really manage to come up with any unique imagery or characters that are very memorable, so the whole thing is just pretty boring. And it seemed like they were also trying to make it sound like it was based on a real story without committing to it. So for this one, I'm gonna have to say total shit. Whew. Now, next up, we have Annabelle 3, otherwise known as Annabelle Comes Home. This movie opens with a cameo from our favorite demon hunters, Ed and Lorraine, who are taking Annabelle home after collecting them from the nurses in the first film. On the way home, their car breaks down, of course, in front of a creepy cemetery. What are the chances? And Lorraine learns that Annabelle is actually a beacon to other spirits. Once they get home, they lock Annabelle up in her glass prison, and Lorraine tells everyone that
the evil is contained.
It's like, yeah, thanks for saying that in such a normal way, Lorraine. Flash forward a bit and the Warrens are going away, so they get a babysitter, Mary Ellen, and she has a friend named Daniela who joins them. Daniela wants to communicate with her dead dad, so she goes into the Warrens' creepy museum and asks for a sign. Annabelle smacks her head on the glass, which makes Daniela interact with her, but then Daniela forgets to lock the case when she returns Annabelle, so Annabelle mounts a sophisticated prison break. Then it turns out Daniela has accidentally unleashed all of the spirits from the Warrens' creepy room, and it becomes like Night at the Museum, but for demons and ghouls and spirits, which, to be honest, is really fun. Like, I thought this was a great premise for this movie, and the whole thing was just like a breezy, fun roller coaster ride. She enlists all this random shit, like a crazy killer bride, the black shuck, which is just like a werewolf, and the ferryman who drops pennies everywhere and tries to take people into the afterlife. There's one scene involving him where the ferryman keeps rolling pennies towards the babysitter to try and creep her out. And she's like really scared, but she keeps picking up the pennies. She's like, well, I am being haunted by a demon, but $1 is $1. Like, leave the goddamn pennies. You don't need money that bad. Meanwhile, Annabelle is haunting Judy Warren, including a part where she goes under her bed covers. Lesbian. And Daniela ends up getting possessed by the scary bride when she, of course, vomits in her mouth. They end up getting the demon out of her by playing a video of Ed doing an exorcism, which seems like a bit of a cheat to me. Like, oh, you can just play the film of an exorcism? Like, does this mean you can do like a FaceTime exorcism these days? I guess so. They then go to contain Annabelle the doll at the end, but it tries to claim Judy's soul right as they do. So they end up just sort of waving a cross around and then they defeat her. And then Judy gets to deliver this iconic line.
The evil has been contained.
Thank you, McKenna Grace. The movie ends with nobody showing up to Judy's birthday party until everyone shows up to her party. Yay! Although this one doesn't claim to be based on a true story, Judy Warren is a real person. She is the Warrens' daughter, and they actually asked her when this movie came out if she could relate to any of the experiences in the film, like no one showing up to her birthday party. And she was like, well, my birthday is in January, so sometimes people can't come to the party because there's a snowstorm, which isn't really the same. And as far as this compares to the real life situation, well, Judy didn't even actually live at her parents' place. She lived at her grandparents', and she hasn't said that she spent her life being haunted by Annabelle. The ghosts and spirits that are released from the Warrens Museum in this movie aren't based on real cases, but some of them are based on folklore. The only one that comes close to a sort of real case is the Black Shuck werewolf, because the Warrens did say, of course, that they encountered a werewolf in their career. This guy was living in London and claiming to be a werewolf, so they ended up flying him to the States and performing an exorcism on him, and it worked, apparently. They even wrote a book about the experience, which they creatively titled Werewolf. So I'm gonna have to rate this one as total shit again, even though I think the movie is fun and I love McKenna Grace. So next up in the series, we have The Conjuring 3, otherwise known as The Conjuring.
Let's just say the devil made me do it.
This movie revolves around the story of Arnie Johnson, a man who killed his landlord and then claimed that
the devil made me do it.
The film opens with the Warrens performing an exorcism on 11-year-old David, and of course Lorraine has dressed up for the occasion. She's always wearing some ruffly, beautiful thing. Like, love Lorraine's outfits, let me just say that. Things get crazy in there, including Ed having a heart attack and a plate flying into a priest's face. In the end, David's brother-in-law Arnie asks the devil to go into him instead of David, and Ed sees this happen, but he's not able to tell anyone because he has a heart attack. Flash forward a bit, and Arnie is experiencing weird visions, and eventually he kills his landlord by stabbing him 22 times. He goes to trial, and the Warrens try to help him by proving that he was possessed, and the stakes have never been higher.
That kid is gonna either live or die depending on what you two find.
We then flash back a bit and see what happened to David before the exorcism. He sees a demonic presence in a waterbed, we've all been there, which caused the waterbed to burst and leave a stain in the floor. Lorraine investigates the weird stain by going under the house, where she finds a totem, which, like any good detective, she takes evidence of. Their clues lead them to Father Kastner, another Australian guy who's been keeping his own little creepy little museum, which is based on the Disciples of the Ram cult, which you might remember from the first Annabelle film. He tells them that the totem was used to place a curse on David. The Warrens' investigation then leads them to inquire about a missing girl who seems to have also been cursed. They go to the police station, and of course, Lorraine wears another totally amazingly appropriate outfit for the occasion. She finds the body of the girl by psychically connecting with her, but then a demon nearly throws her off a cliff. Of course. They then decide that they need to link with the dead girl's body, so they break into the morgue like crazy people, and Lorraine forms the connection, but it turns out to be a two-way connection, like a FaceTime. And the witch who did the curse can see Lorraine. The witch is actually trying to get Arnie to kill himself in prison, but Lorraine stops it by happening by doing some sort of psychic magic power move.
By the blood of Calvary, I command
She also nearly gets killed by a fat naked dead guy in the morgue, but we can't worry about that. We have to move on. Anyway, the Warrens go home and Ed passes out, and then when he wakes up, he's attacked by the same fat naked dead guy. He tries to kill him, but then it turns out that he's possessed and he's actually trying to kill Lorraine. They then find a totem in his office, and it seems that Ed has also been cursed by the witch. No. Lorraine then goes to visit Father Kastner, who tells her that the witch is actually his damn daughter and she's in the house. So he tells Lorraine to hide in these secret tunnels, but the witch sees her go into the secret tunnels and then she kills her dad. Down below, Lorraine and the witch have this iconic Mission Impossible 2 style knife fight, and Lorraine even smashes the witch in the face with a damn rock. Possessed Ed then shows up and tries to kill Lorraine, but Lorraine breaks him out of the possession by making him remember that he loves her. And then Ed actually breaks the witch's altar, which breaks all the curses, and then the demon that the witch summoned comes and claims her soul, because the demon needs to claim a soul. Duh. They leave the house and Ed nearly has a heart attack again, and he forgot his pills. But luckily Lorraine is keeping one in her locket, which is a great move. Like, definitely try that for festivals. And I should mention, while this is happening, Arnie's soul is also trying to be claimed by the demon, but it doesn't, and then he gets charged for manslaughter and goes to prison, and then Ed builds Lorraine a gazebo in their backyard, and everyone lives happily ever after. Yay! Now, I know people generally don't like this film, but I'll be real, I had a really good time with this film. Maybe it's because I watched all 9 of these films in a row, but I actually appreciate how they switched up the formula to make it like NCIS Ghost Hunters and have it just be about Ed and Lorraine investigating demon crimes. I will admit it does probably have the least scares of the franchise and doesn't really stick out to me as like a scary movie, but if you put Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson in ridiculous outfits solving crimes, I'm gonna be there. Now let's see how this stacks up against the true story of Arnie Johnson. The real story also begins with 11-year-old David, who said that he began having visions at home. He said that he'd been visited by a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features and jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves, who wanted him to beware. The family also said that they were hearing strange noises in their attic, so they called the Warrens for help. They concluded that David was possessed by a demon and that they even saw David levitate at one point, which we have heard before. They then held an exorcist for David, and witnesses say they did see Arnie Johnson ask the devil to come into him instead of David. From then on, David started improving while Arnie deteriorated, and Arnie's girlfriend Debbie said he started going into trances and growling. One day after a lunch where everyone was drinking heavily, Arnie killed his landlord by stabbing him with a pocket knife. He was apprehended by police and apparently said to the officer, quote, "I need help because I have a drinking problem." Arnie apparently also didn't remember anything from the incident. He did indeed try to use the devil made me do it excuse, but the judge didn't allow it to be used in court. So the Warrens being like, we have to investigate this case to save Arnie's life is all total shit. In the end, Johnson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and served 5 years in prison. While Arnie and Debbie stand by the Warrens' version of events and say that it's true, David and his brother Carl have since come out swinging against them. After a book was published about the events, Carl said that 11-year-old David was not experiencing possession but mental illness. He said, "My brother was never possessed. He, along with my family, was manipulated and exploited, something the Warrens were very good at," which sounds just like the Warrens that we know. Also, you might have guessed it, but the storyline with the witch was completely invented for the film. film. So given the amount of creative license they took with all the witch stuff, as well as the family's comments about Ed and Lorraine, I'm gonna have to also classify this movie as total shit. So finally, after The Conjuring 3, we go back to Nun Town and we get a sequel to The Nun, creatively titled The Nun II. And I feel like they had so many better options with what they could have called this movie. Like, what about Two Nun Too Furious, The Nun 2 Pray Harder, or even The Nun 2 Back in the Habit? But no, we just got The Nun II. So this movie opens with a pretty cool sequence where we see the titular nun hanging out in the basement of a church. She's haunting this little boy and a priest, and she makes all the holy water dry up and then burns the priest alive. When the nun leaves, she does so in the form of Maurice, who we saw being possessed by her at the end of the first film. He goes to a boarding school in France where he works as a janitor and creeps out the little girls. Meanwhile, Nun Famiga has gone to Italy, where she's hanging out with Nun Storm Reed, who I was so excited to see join the franchise. Like, Lord knows she's amazing at looking scared around a corner. So Nun Famiga and Nun Storm Reed get called upon to end the titular nun when it turns out she's back and she's making her way across Europe, making other nuns kill themselves. And I know what you guys are thinking. Nun Famiga is in Italy, Maurice is working at a boarding school in France. Where is Father Burke from the first movie? Well, Father Burkhive, I'm so sorry to tell you, it turns out that he died of cholera between films. So sad. So anyway, Thaisa goes on the investigation trail and starts being haunted by the nun again, including this cunty move she does where she makes herself appear in a magazine stand, because apparently manipulating Vogue magazine is one of the nun's powers. Work. Nun Famiga learns that the titular nun is actually after the holy relic of the Eyes of St. Lucy, and we also get a bit of a nun lore drop where we learn that she was actually a former angel who was stripped of her power by God. They also learn that the eyes are probably at the boarding school that Maurice works at, so they go there and try and get the eyes before the nun does. When they get there, Maurice's possession is getting worse and worse, and when the girls try to stop him, he goes full James Charles mode.
Hello, sister.
They do an exorcism, but it only half works, so Storm Reed whacks him in the head with a crowbar, which, like, respect. They eventually find the Eyes of St. Lucy, but Maurice breaks free and Storm Reed and the girls at the boarding school get attacked by a goat demon. Don't ask. One of the little girls from the school tries to hide in the clock tower with the Eyes of St. Lucy, and when Maurice finds her, shit goes down there, the clock falls down into the cellar and they all reconvene there. They then try and get Miss Nun out of Maurice, but she again goes full nun mode and lights Thaisa Famiga on fire. But the twist, it turns out Thaisa Famiga is actually a descendant of St. Lucy, so she can't be burned. Then her and Nun Storm Reed do a prayer that turns all the wine in the cellar into the blood of Christ, which once again kills the nun. Yay! While I didn't love this movie, I did find it to be a big step up from the Nun one. This one manages to create some pretty creepy imagery, and the last half hour when everything is going full nun mode is pretty cool. It also feels generally a bit more well made, and like the director was actually trying to do something unique. These movies still have an issue where I don't really care about any of the characters, but maybe this will be fixed in The Nun 3, where hopefully Storm Reed will return. Now all of this leads to the latest Conjuring film, The Last Rites. After the demon detective detour of the third movie, this movie takes things back to its roots and depicts the haunting of the Smurl family at their house. And yes, I said Smurl, not Smurf, Smurl. The film opens with the young Warrens investigating a haunted mirror that makes a very pregnant Lorraine go into labor early. She makes it to the hospital and gives birth, but the baby is stillborn until Lorraine's prayers bring the baby back to life. Yay! We then meet the Smurl family at Heather Smurl's confirmation party, and Grandpa Smurl gives her the very same haunted mirror. Thanks, Grandpa. Freaking old people, so annoying. Just like all the other films, weird shit starts happening around the house. They even try and get rid of the mirror at one point, but it makes one of the girls projectile vomit blood at the breakfast table and she's throwing up glass from the mirror, which is like completely insane and then is never mentioned again in the film. It's like, at least make a gag of it. She could have been like, ugh, that's the last time I'm having glass for breakfast. Then back to the Warrens, who are kind of washed up now. They're giving lectures to just a handful of people and they're thinking about retiring. Judy is also all grown up now and she's having visions of her own, including a scene where Lorraine orders a linguine with clams and then sees a demon in the restaurant. I guess she accidentally ordered a linguine with demons. Judy's also dating this guy called Tony, who Ed doesn't seem to really approve of, but Tony ends up asking Judy to marry him after playing a ping pong game with Ed. A really huge chunk of this movie focuses on Judy and Tony's relationship, and I think the filmmakers really overestimated how much we would care about them. them. At a certain point, I was like, why the hell am I watching Tony and Ed play ping pong? Like, I want to see a demon. Where are the demons? Judy eventually convinces Ed and Lorraine to help the Smurl family, and when they show up, Lorraine tells them that there's 4 spirits haunting them.
This thing in your house is a demon.
There's a lumberjack man and his wife and her mother who he killed with an axe, and then of course there's just a general demon who's manipulating the other 3 spirits. Annabelle of course is also there, and she's haunting Judy, and at one point Annabelle even becomes giant, which was really fun. So Judy eventually becomes possessed by the demon from the mirror, and at one point she actually even throws the dog Smurl against the wall, which is like the craziest thing I've seen in a movie this year. Like, why did the demon have such a beef with the dog Smurl? Like, leave the dog alone. In the end, the Warren family, including Judy and Tony, perform an exorcism on the mirror, and the mirror fights back, but they become like these Marvel superheroes and they banish the demon back to hell. Also, side note, Ed is still reading from his Bible when doing the exorcism. Like, he said he's done over 1,000 cases. Like, have you not memorized the words yet? Come on, man. Maybe it is time to retire. The film ends with Judy and Tony getting married, and we even get cameos from the Perrin family, Peggy and Janet from the second film, David from the third film, and even director James Wan. Ed and Lorraine dance at the wedding, and Lorraine says she's had a vision of the rest of their lives, including them writing books and having great-grandchildren and enjoying their later years. For some reason, her vision didn't include them making movies about their lives. I kind of hope these films would end like Lord of the Rings and have it end with Lorraine sitting down to write the book of The Conjuring. I'll be honest, overall, I found this to be a really disappointing finale to the series. The reason I watch these movies is to have Vera Farmiga in a ridiculous outfit while Patrick Wilson stands in the corner and looks handsome, and there was not enough of that in this movie. I also think it's really lame for the final villain of the Conjuring franchise to be a mirror, but maybe that's fitting for someone like Ed Warren. Like, if I was dating a 15-year-old, I would also find it hard to look in the mirror. I also really think they should have brought back Valak, the nun, for the last movie. Like, everyone loves the nun, and she's kind of the big bad of the franchise. Like, come on, just chuck her in there. Cameo, please, something. So to see how this stacks up against the real story, in real life, the Smurl family did contact the Warrens after experiencing a haunting at their place.
It's very powerful. It's invisible. I don't care if you want to call it a devil or a ghost or a demon. There's something in this home.
Just like in the film, the family said the hauntings began when a light fell on one of the girls.
In the kitchen, and the ceiling light came crashing down.
They also said they experienced foul odors, loud noises, sexual assault by the demon, and even the most ridiculous part of the movie when the dog was thrown against the wall. Thank God they got that part right. The Smurls went public with their experience and eventually did get the help of the Warrens, who told them that 4 demons were haunting them. But it wasn't actually the Warrens that got rid of them in the end. It was a reverend visiting from a church who conducted intense prayers that got rid of them. The Smurls then said they were sick of the media attention around their case, but then surprise, a month later they wrote a book with the Warrens. Because if there's one thing the Warrens are good at, it's making money off demons. Also, a really important part of this, at the time this was happening, a lot of people I think fairly suggested that maybe the Smurl family was actually experiencing some sort of physical or mental impairment that was causing this haunting. They denied it, but then the father of the family, Jack Smurl, said after all this went down, he had surgery to remove water from his brain that had been there for decades as a result of meningitis. And some of the symptoms of having water in your brain is short-term memory loss and hallucinations. So I'm sorry, but for the credibility rating of this film, I'm going to have to invent a new rating, which I'm going to call Water in the Brain, because their story was giving water in the brain. So there we have it, guys, an exhaustive exploration of the Conjuring cinematic universe. And before anyone says anything, yes, I know about the Curse of La Llorona and Wolves at the Door, but because they're not officially part of the Conjuring universe, I'm not going to cover them. Overall, my lasting impression of these films is that most of them are really great at being big popcorn movies, and they exist as a nice counterpoint to all the elevated horror that comes out now, given that these just exist to scare you. I think the secret source of these films is also Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. Even though the real Ed and Lorraine were shitbags, their committed performances and great chemistry keep you hooked and engaged for these larger than life stories. Also, side note, I can't end this video without mentioning the time that Ed and Lorraine came to Sydney, Australia to be on the Don Lane show. And while they were here, they investigated an allegedly haunted house in Gladsville. Apparently Lorraine came in and just laid on the floor and said she felt vibrations. Like, okay, I feel like she just wanted to lay on the floor. She wanted to rest. And they didn't seem to really actually help. They just told them that they should move out, which is like, yeah, I think they could have thought of that themselves. So that's it, guys. We did it. Please like and subscribe if you like the video, and let me know if there's anything you want me to talk about, and maybe I'll see you next time when they release the Nun II Tokyo Drift or something. Bye.